Good to see you tonight. We're in 2 Samuel. We're going to try to finish chapter 12 and move on in to the next phase of David's life, kind of bring this to an end. I want to say, as we're going to read this last section of 2 Samuel 12, I want to raise a question with you. But as I raise that question with you, I'll tell you in advance, I do not have an answer for that question. So sometime we'll ask a question simply to explore it with you, see what your thoughts are or what you may or may not know about it. And so certainly we want to do that tonight. Before we read beginning at verse 24, I want to ask you, do you remember what we were looking at last week from chapter 12? Generally, the subject was the death of David's child. Why did David's child die? The Lord struck him and he died. Okay, there we go. So now verse 24. David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and he went into her and lay with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. Now the Lord loved him, and he sent word by the hand of Nathan the prophet, so he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. Now, some version might even say this, or suggest this. The King James says he sent word by the hand of Nathan the prophet. Others would suggest that it should be translated, he was tutored by Nathan the prophet. Raised and or reared, or simply tutored by Nathan the prophet. It is interesting because I don't know anything about Hebrew, and I wouldn't be able to guess myself based on what the Hebrew text says, but I do know that among Hebrew scholars there is some question about the translation here and this one sentence in verse 25. Either way, word is sent by Nathan the prophet, and he is named Jedediah, meaning favored of the Lord, or beloved of the Lord, and that was the name of Solomon. Let me ask you again, what were we talking about last week? Death of what child? A child born to who? And who was the father? And who was responsible for the death of that child? And so two people are joined together again and have a child, and who loves this child? You understand my question? I don't understand some things. And this is one of those things that I simply do not have the ability to get my mind around. It doesn't compute. Why would God judge in one instance? Now you might argue because when this other child was conceived, it was conceived in adultery. But why is she his wife presently? Because of murder. So I don't understand. So if you have any insight, would like to share insight, I would be more than happy to hear it. I will say this, to complicate things a bit, we read these words in Matthew chapter 1, the Gospel of Matthew, beginning of verse 1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon, Nahshon begot Solomon. Solomon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her, who had been the wife of Uriah. And that's how Matthew reports it. Now, in Matthew's genealogy, he's tracing it through who? Joseph. Now, was Joseph the actual father of Jesus? But for Jesus to have legal claim to the throne, he had to trace his lineage through his father. So Matthew, as a good Jew would have done, traced the lineage of Jesus through his father. And Joseph was his legal father, his father here on the earth. the one that raised him, at least for a time. And so it's appropriate that Matthew would list this genealogical list through the line of Joseph. Luke, on the other hand, gives a little different view. Luke gives a genealogical list, but he's listing it from not Joseph, but who? Mary. And so the actual flesh and blood line of Jesus does not trace through Joseph, but specifically traces through Mary. So in Luke chapter 3, verse 23, now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi, the son of Jonah, the son of Joseph, the son of Mattathiah, the son of Amos, the son of Nahum, the son of Elsli, the son of Nagai, the son of Maath, the son of Maathiah, the son of Semai, the son of Joseph, the son of Judah, the son of Joannes, the son of Rica, the son of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the son of Neri, the son of Milchi, the son of Adai, the son of Kosam, the son of Elmodam, the son of the son of Hosea, the son of Eleazar, the son of Joram, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi, the son of Simeon, the son of Judah, the son of Joseph, the son of Jonan, the son of Eliakim, the son of Meliah, the son of Menon, the son of Mattathiah, the son of Nathan, the son of David. So, the son of David, fleshly speaking, was not Solomon, but was Nathan. But legally, his line is traced through Solomon. I don't know about you, that raises a question in my mind. Not a bad question, just one of curiosity. Why would God choose this child to call him Jedediah and assign him a prophet, if that is indeed the case? And why would God bless, after having taken the life of one child, now does the exact opposite of the other? Yes.
Well, when David had the first child, she was not married to his wife. And if you read the book of Psalms, it's just completely begging God to forgive him for all these sins. And then that's after that, it's when Solomon was born. Would that not have made a difference because of his penitent heart?
You know, I suppose, but if you were so inclined and you decided you didn't like your spouse anymore, you could have them killed and you could get remarried to the person you want to be married to, ask God to forgive you, and God would bless that union.
But God can foresee the future of both children.
That's true.
God sees your heart. He knows your intention.
So was the first child conceived by David and Bathsheba a bad person? Nothing that you're saying answers my question.
Not at the time of his birth, no, but he could have been when he was permitted to be grown.
Well, can't you get forgiveness for all these horrible sins?
I sure hope so.
And so then this was after.
For David's sake.
After all this, because that's after that was when Solomon was born. Would that not have been?
It's true.
acceptable to God?
In the whole scheme of things, that baby died and went to heaven. I mean,
That's true.
that's a blessing.
And Solomon wound up having 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Maybe God just wanted that child to be in heaven with him.
Think about all those mother-in-laws. All right, y'all not helping me. I'm not helping you, so we're going to move on to verse 26. It is interesting, isn't it? Yes.
I've wondered too about why Jonathan, David's best friend and all warm and supportive, died with his father that day. I sometimes think maybe he should have been cut a break, but the word says that he died in the battle along with his father. Like you're saying, that innocent child obviously didn't do anything wrong.
Well, in Jonathan's case, I hear what you're saying, and I understand kind of where you're going with that thought process, I think. But in Jonathan's case, he was very loyal to David, but he also loved his father. And so I can understand then why he would have been by his father's side in the field of battle. So that's, to me, easier to understand, I think, than one child that dies as exacting a punishment to David, and then the other child is blessed in the most profound way. In fact, he's not just mentioned in Matthew chapter 1, but he did become the next king to sit on David's throne. So I don't know, just I don't have an answer for you. I'm just raising the question. I'm just telling you how things sometimes will strike my mind, and I don't know what to do with it other than, well, there's something we just don't understand, and we don't have to understand. I do know this: God sees far more than we see and understands far more than we understand. And perhaps at times like this, we just have to be reminded we're finite creatures and we just don't have any clue, really, why God does what he does. Now, Joab fought against Rabbah of the people of Ammon and took the royal city. And Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Rabbah and I have taken the city's water supply. Now therefore gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it, lest I take the city and it be called after my name. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah, fought against it and took it. Then he took their king's crown from his head. Its weight was a talent of gold with precious stones. And it was set on David's head. Also he brought of the spoil of the city in great abundance, and he brought out the people who were in it and put them to work with saws and iron picks and iron axes and made them cross over to brickwork. So he did all the cities of the people of Ammon. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. This is interesting to me because Joab really had every right to take the city, had every right to receive the accolades associated with taking of that city and the praise associated with taking that city. So he's just showing extreme loyalty to David, it would seem to me, and telling him it's time for the city to fall. You need to be here for that turning of the key and to take the glory. And so he handed it off to David. David would have been far better served had he gone into battle the first time. This battle would have already been resolved, first of all. And secondly, David never would have gotten involved with Bathsheba. But if he had never gotten involved with Bathsheba, there wouldn't have been a Solomon. So you understand how things can get even more complicated. If there hadn't been a Solomon, would there have been a book of Ecclesiastes or many of the Proverbs that we gain so much insight and wisdom from? I don't know. I do know that Solomon was a very wise man, the wisest of all men. So, again, a blessing granted to him by God at his request. Any other question about chapter 12? Good. Chapter 13. Before we get into this chapter, I'd just like to make a few general observations. There's nothing worse than problems at home. You go to work, you can have a bad day at work, somebody can smart off to you or mistreat you or whatever, but I'm going home to be with my wife or my husband or my children, or just going to go to my home to be by myself and turn on my TV and enjoy some quiet time. Whatever you do, but what happens when you don't have a quiet place to go and to get away from the trouble and the strain of the world? What happens when your home is more tumultuous than the place of work, and you're not able to go home? He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind, Solomon would say in Proverbs 11, verse 29. You suppose Solomon learned this from someone? And maybe he was speaking from experience when he talked about troubling one's own house. A lady told me today, she was talking about someone who had lost their husband recently. She said, it's a terrible thing. I feel very badly for her, but I don't think it's any worse, and probably not as worse or as bad as the divorce I went through. I've had a number of people say through my lifetime that death of a spouse is probably easier to bear than divorce, particularly depending on the circumstances of that divorce and what brought it about. If someone dies, well, they can't help that. No fault of their own. We miss them. We're sad they're gone. When divorce happens, it's generally because bad choices were made on one or both parts. And so there's a lot of regret and a lot of other factors that come into it. But certainly, divorce can be one of the surest ways to trouble your own house. But you can trouble your house in a number of ways. You can trouble your house through neglect. I saw something on Facebook the other day, a picture of a nuclear bomb going off. And it was going off in someone's living room. And it was a small miniature nuclear bomb. But this is what happens once I've cleaned my house and the grandkids come over and this little bomb goes off. Well, if you have grandchildren, and I do, and they do come to see you, and it's a wonderful thing, when they leave a lot in their wake. And they leave reminders that they were here. And you do find stuff days later that's stuffed here and lost there. And, well, how'd that wind up over here? And, you know, things happen when the grandkids come to see you. And you're glad they come to see you, and you're really glad when they go back home to mom and dad. But the house is destroyed. Now, when the house gets destroyed, what do?
You just clean it up after you.
Or you let it rot and stink. You can neglect paying your bills and see what that does for you.
Barbara Bush, who just died, made a wise statement about the home.
Yes?
She said, society's success doesn't depend nearly as much on what happens at the White House as it does what happens at your house.
That's right. Well, she's exactly right about it. She was very much a family-oriented woman. And everyone that knew her, I think sang that same tune about her, that she was very much a mother, grandmother, and wife. And said she'd only kissed one man in her whole life. And I guess that was the president. I'm assuming that's who they were talking about. But fail to show proper attention to your wife or to your husband. Neglect your relationship. You can trouble your home through abuse. You can abuse your spouse. Husbands are oftentimes, in fact, more times than not, you'd be surprised how many men are beaten by their wives. I mean, we laugh about it, but it's true. I mean, you can look at the raw data and the statistics from a legal standpoint. There's a lot of domestic cases against females. Many of them are serving time in prison because they beat their husbands regularly. And I suppose their husbands are afraid to defend themselves, or maybe she'll sit on him. I don't know, but men are beat quite often by their wives, more than you would imagine. And wives, of course, and that's the stereotypical sexist view that people have of men beating their wives, because we're all Neanderthals, you know. But you can trouble your home through abuse, or you can abuse your children. You can abuse them emotionally, verbally, sexually. You can neglect them. You can do all kinds of things to trouble your own house. David brought a great deal of suffering into his own house. In fact, it's fair to say that from the time he went into Bathsheba, there was not a peaceful day in his life. There was never a time, never a period of time, I might say, in David's life from that day till the day he died, that David was absolutely at peace, and I'm sure had a good night's rest. That's tragic. Okay, verse 1 of chapter 13. After this, Absalom the son of David had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the sister of David, loved her. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend, whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. Now Jonadab was a very crafty man, and he said to him, "Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." But Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat from her hand.'" Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill, and when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." And David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour, kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. She took the pan and placed them out before him, but he refused to eat. Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." And they all went out from him. Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom that I may eat from your hand." Tamar took the cakes which she had made, brought them to Amnon, her brother, in the bedroom. Now when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." But she answered him, "No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing shall be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. And I, where could I take my shame? And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone." So she said to him, "No, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who attended him and said, "Here, put this woman out away from me and bolt the door behind her." Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Tamar put ashes on her head, tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. Wow. This is horrible. It sounds like something you would hear about from the Kardashians or something maybe today. Maybe some political family. This dirt gets out on this family. You know, one of the things about King David or any of these great men or women in the Bible kind of remind you that you need to be thankful that you're not a Bible figure, or that you're not a popular person and everyone talks about you. I mean, everybody in their family has issues, quote unquote issues. It's really bad when the entire planet is able to read in gory detail the things that take place in your family and among family members. And indeed, that's what we're seeing on display here. This is horrible, what's taking place. And the question I guess I could ask to start with, did Amnon love his sister? You remember we're translating Hebrew into English. So when we read the word love, it's kind of like when the Greek word agape or phileo or eros is translated into English, it's just love. Is this love?
This is lust.
Okay, now it has to be. Animal lust, right? If he loved her, would he have raped her? She was his sister. Now, they had the same father, they had different mothers. Absalom, of course, was her full brother. They had the same father and the same mother, and so that's why there's such a difference here between the way they treat them, I suppose. But isn't it interesting when Absalom sees her, the first question he asks, "Has Amnon been with you?" Why would he ask that question? Was it obvious that Amnon had been infatuated with her? Or did Amnon have the reputation of being that kind of person? Obviously, because she's torn the sleeves off of her robe and she's put the ashes on her head, it was clear she's lost her virginity. She's in shame. She's in mourning. So someone had violated her, and he knew that. But the very first suspect that comes to mind was his brother. And has Amnon been with you? That may say something about Amnon. If that's true. If that's true about Amnon and he having that reputation, why did David, pray tell, listen to him when he said, "Have her come and fix food for me," when he was only pretending to be sick? Was David that gullible? I don't know that Amnon necessarily had that reputation. Some commentators suggest perhaps he was known as a ladies' man, And that's why Absalom assumed right off the bat. I would be more inclined to think maybe he had expressed this lust for his sister on more than one occasion, more than just to Jonadab, maybe to others. Either way, when you think about what's happening here, you have to ask yourself, how could the man who was described as being after God's own heart have a son that would do something like this? Did David not teach his children better than to behave this way? Did he not tell them that things like this are wrong? Do you suppose? Did Amnon know that it was wrong? Tamar knew it was wrong. We don't do this kind of thing in Israel. So did he know that it was wrong? Why did he feel like it was okay to do this? The king's son, maybe he felt privileged. That may be part of it.
He just didn't care.
Sir?
He just didn't care.
Didn't care, perhaps. Could be an explanation. I do know one thing about parenting. And we often have poked fun at parents who live by this philosophy, but I think more parents do than want to admit to it. But our children will do as we do, and not as we say. We can tell them all day long, you need to be in church. You need to believe in God. You need to put God first in your life. You don't need to use bad language. You need to have your priorities right. We can tell them things like that all day long. Children will do as we do, more than as we say. And what's tragic is what we're beginning to read here in chapter 13 is almost a duplication of what we read in chapters 11 and 12 with David himself. And so his children are, in a sense, mirroring or parroting, however you want to describe it, the behavior of their own father. Both Amnon and Absalom, in some respect, behave as their father behaved. So if you want your children to use good language, then you need to use good language around them. If you don't want them to smoke cigarettes or drink beer or be addicted to drugs, then don't do those things yourself. If you want them to have priorities where they put the Lord first and seek the welfare of others before their own, then do that yourself. And if you want them to have a good attitude about life and about the Lord's cause, then have one yourself. Otherwise, your children will do as you do and not as you say they should do. But Jonadab was his friend, or we might say his cousin, but maybe his cousin and his friend. With friends like this, who needs enemies? So was Jonadab doing a friendly thing and advising him on how he could rape his sister? I mean, this is grotesque behavior. So is this friendly advice? 1 Corinthians 15, Paul said, evil companions do what? What if Jonadab had said, are you out of your mind? You need to go see a doctor. Or if you don't shut up with that stupidity, I'm going to tell your dad. Or I'm going to tell Nathan. I'm going to tell somebody, you need some serious help. Something bad wrong with you. That's what a real friend would have done. Would not have encouraged him to follow through with this horrible behavior. Is there evil in every person?
I would say there's something in everyone.
We don't like the word evil, do we? Does everybody sin? Why do you sin? Because you're good? What makes you sin? Righteousness? Evil. Evil makes you sin, right? Is there evil in everybody? Is it evil to sin? No, we're trying to be too politically correct. This is a Bible class. You can be blunt here. It's evil. And I know it hurts our feelings, but we're evil. We do evil things. And when we sin, we do evil things. And so there is evil in all of us, but if someone's encouraging that, nurturing that evil within us, we're in a very dangerous place. And so preacher will say to the youth group, and youth director will say to the youth group, be careful who your friends are. Hang out with the right people. Is that good advice? Yeah. Is it good advice for older people to have good friends? Yeah. You know, when you think about people who are faithful and loyal to the church, people who have 2 or 3 close friends in the church generally wind up being faithful to the church. Those who do not form friendships or relationships within the church typically do not survive for very long. That's just human nature. And that's from my own personal observation. And others have also researched it and have reached the same conclusion. So we need to have good friends, the right kind of friends, otherwise we'll have the wrong kind of friends. And we'll start hanging out with people who say, why do you need to go to church at all? Why do you need the Bible at all? Why do you need to organize religion at all? You say, well, I know better than that, but if you continue to hang around people like that and talk to people like that, eventually it's going to start to wear you down. When someone's going to get married, and they're going to marry someone who's not a New Testament Christian, we urge them, don't do that. Why? Because if your spouse is not going to be faithful with you in the Lord's cause, it may create problem for you. And over time, they may wear you down. They may break your will. They may break your determination. They may cause you to stumble and falter. We need to be careful about the Jonadabs in our own life. And it may not just be personal acquaintances. It could be the music we listen to. It could be the books that we read, the magazines that we are drawn to, or it could be the kind of television programs that we find so entertaining, the kind of things you're feasting your mind on. Are you nurturing that evil within? Amnon needed a godly friend who would have urged him to avoid this sinful desire on his part. I want you to think about what's happened here. He's stronger than her, and so he forces her. He raped her. I'm sure, does anyone here besides me watch the news? Let's just cut to the chase. Anybody ever follow the news? Are you familiar enough with the news? Okay, thank you. So you know about the Me Too movement, right? So what is the Me Too movement today? What's that? It's mostly ABC, CBS reporters who have women reporterettes who are coming out saying, yeah, he sexually harassed me 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago. Most of these people are really old dinosaurs from the hippie generation. I mean, 150 years ago he did whatever, and they're still reporting in the news, by the way. And so they're calling them the Me Too crowd. So everybody's just piling on. Okay, yeah, he sexually harassed me too, you know. And sometimes the other way around. Do women get sexually harassed in the workplace?
Yes.
Do men get sexually harassed in the workplace?
Yes.
And that was a louder yes. When he talked? Well, so, but those kind of things do happen. And it's deplorable, it's unfortunate, and it's wrong when that kind of thing happens. What's the best thing that ever happened to females? Idea-wise. In the world of ideas, what's the best thing that ever happened to women? Christianity. Period. No question about it. Now, the left today, the Me Too crowd that's out there making these charges, some of them I think are made up, maybe blown out of proportion because they want money and they want fame or whatever. Whatever their motive. They're decrying the Christian faith. Now, if you look at cultures around the world, I'm talking about from the beginning of time to the present time. Look at Muslim countries, for example, where Christianity is tolerated at best and in most instances openly persecuted and suppressed, as it's becoming the case here in a godless, secular world. Look at how women are treated there. Where are women treated best? When you think about Europe in the Middle Ages, what was a word that came out of Middle Age Europe that had to do with male-female relations? Holding the door for a woman.
Chivalry.
Chivalry. What's behind and underneath and girding chivalry? Or being a gentleman? Where does that idea come from? Christianity, that's right. A Christian worldview. And so here we are in the West, throwing Christianity to the wolves in the name of everyone wants to be equal. We want to treat women equal. Well, I've got some sad news for those women who are screaming to get rid of Christianity. Give it a little time, and it won't be long until you are treated horribly by males in society, because that's the story of the human race. Men abusing women, particularly men in powerful positions who feel like they can get by with it because, well, they can get by with it. And so they treat women not as fellow human beings or being heirs together of the grace of life, but rather as subhuman or secondary citizens. Certainly the gospel has elevated women. Would it have been sinful for Amnon to marry his half-sister? So why did she tell him, ask your daddy and he'll give me to you? Why did she? Abraham did marry his sister, that's true. But Abraham lived before the law of Moses. Leviticus 18 verse 6, none of you shall approach anyone who is near of kin to him to uncover his nakedness. I am the Lord. The nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother you shall not uncover. She is your mother, you shall not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife you shall not uncover, it is your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father or the daughter of your mother, whether be born at home or elsewhere, their nakedness you shall not uncover. The nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, their nakedness you shall not uncover, for theirs is your own nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, begotten by your father, she is your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness, etc., etc. He's very specific. And according to the law of Moses, it would have been a sin for David to give this woman to her brother in marriage. And one or two ways of looking at that. Maybe she was trying to buy time because she saw in the heat of the moment, if I can just buy a little time, maybe I can shut him up and get him out of the way and get out of the situation. I won't come bake any more cakes for it. It's possible. Or maybe she thought, David's accustomed to violating the law of God. Maybe he won't mind violating yet another one, and we could actually be joined in marriage. I don't know. I'm not sure how you would understand that, how you might read that. I think she was fearing for her very life at this point and trying to get out of a very bad situation. David was, from all counts, a permissive parent, and that's going to become evident. When you read verse 21, David heard all these things. He was very angry. You ever been to Walmart? You see some 4 or 5 year old brat screaming they want something. And their mama or their daddy or their grandparent or whatever say, you're not going to get that right now. And they pitch a fit. And then the parent or whoever give them what they want. You ever seen that? You ever wish that there was a pole out in the parking lot where you could take the parent, strap them to it, and beat the daylights out of them for abusing the child? Have you ever thought about, thoughts like that pop into my head sometimes. I'm like, why don't we go back to the day? And by the way, we could depopulate prisons that way today. I'm serious. If a man beats his wife, take him to the town square and beat him with rods or with a whip. Whip the man. He needs a whipping. Putting him in prison for 10 or 15 years is ridiculous because we all have to pay for that. You say, well, he ought to pay for his crime. Well, let him pay for his crime. Beat him. You say, well, that's inhumane. I don't know. Maybe it is. I do know this, that when David heard about this, rather than just get mad about it, he actually should have done something about it. Now, what should David have done about it? Leviticus chapter 20, verse 17, if a man take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness. He shall bear his guilt. What does it mean to be cut off on the side of your feet? What does that mean? It's an idiomatic expression. What does it mean? Probably stoned to death, or in some way, they're put to death. This was the death penalty. And so David should have executed his son. David had executed many people before. But this is his son and heir apparent to the throne, his eldest son. And so David's mad about it, but doesn't do anything about it, which, by the way, leads to phase 3 of David's suffering. He's already lost a son because the Lord struck the child. Now he's had a son rape his sister and brought shame and reproach into his family. That's strike 2. But now because he's not going to do anything about it, he's about to face phase 3. And it's going to be very unpleasant. It came to pass, after 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Absalom came to the king and said, "Kindly note, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be a burden to you." Then it sounded like my mother. Every time I invite her to my house, I don't want to be a burden to you. I don't want to be bothered. It sounds just like that. I'm like, "You're not a burden to me. You come to my house anytime." Anyway, that's what you always say. "I don't want to be a burden to you. You're not a burden to me." Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. I guess that's the way parents do. They just, "I don't want to be a burden to you." But then again, if the king's going, you're going to have the Secret Service. You're going to have this long entourage and all this, protection. And so it would have been a lot of people to feed. I suppose he's just saying, "I don't want to be a burden to you." Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." Now, wait a minute. Was David clueless? Did he not know that Absalom hated Amnon? Did he not know that Absalom wanted to take vengeance on Amnon? Did he not know this? The king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" Absalom urged him. So he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Why? I mean, I don't know about you, but that troubles me. Why is David doing that? If he's not going to take the law and deal with it because he's his son, why is he going to let him walk into a wolf's den? I mean, he had to know this is not going to end well. Was David getting old? I'm just asking questions. I don't know if David's lost his judgment. This is troubling to me because it's one of those questions that it just doesn't add up in my mind. What did Absalom say to David when he urged him? I mean, maybe he made some kind of argument that sounded good. I don't know. So Absalom had commanded his servant, saying, "Watch now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not be afraid, have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. It came to pass while they were on their way, that news came to David, saying, "Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." That was fake news, but not one of them is left. So the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all the servants stood by him with their clothes torn. Then Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, answered and said, "Let not my lord suppose they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he forged his sister Tamar." Now, how did Jonadab know that and David not? Now, therefore, what?
Maybe David did know.
How could he not know that?
Maybe he thought it was the right thing for him to do.
Maybe he thought brothers are going to mend fences. Yes.
I thought that about what you hear. If he did that to his sister, maybe he did that sort of history. You think, well, if he did that, and he was being loyal, he would know the consequences and what the people would think, right? That it was something that you would think that he had done before, maybe in history. David after losing his son, and then he does that. Sure, David, I think David knew what he was walking into. But after losing his son, David couldn't do this to his other son. And that was just the way
know what else to do.
He didn't know what else to do, but he knew that something had to happen, so rather than do it himself, he let it happen, they didn't want him to. I think he had sort of one of the history to do that if he did it to his own sister, you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't say, it just sounds like something.
He had that reputation.
That in David's own house,
Yeah.
he would do it elsewhere, common people, wherever you may get history.
Well, either way, Jonadab knew that only Amnon was dead. Because he said, I knew from the day that this happened, Absalom wanted to kill him. He knew that.
Right.
And it's been 2 years. It's hard to keep something that strongly felt, quiet. I mean, anyway, Absalom fled. And the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said to the king, Look, the king's sons are coming, as your servant said, so it is. So it was, as soon as he had finished speaking, that the king's sons indeed came. They lifted up their voice and wept. Also the king and all the servants wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. Which son? So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. I'm assuming that he mourned for Amnon, and then after a period of time started mourning for Absalom. What?
Didn't Nathan tell David that the sword would?
Yeah, he did. I imagine when David heard this tiding that he's dead, that those words were ringing in his ears.
Yet replayed that lamb fourfold.
He is. And it's not over yet. It's still brewing. In fact, it's just getting started. We're literally just setting the stage for really the worst that's yet to come for David. Of course, if you look at the language here, when the family all got together, what was left of the family, they all lifted up their voices and they wept bitterly. That's probably the best way to describe David's life from the time he went into Bathsheba to the time he died. That was his lot in life. He just wept bitterly. He was a very unhappy man because of what had happened with Bathsheba. Now, why did Absalom go to Ammihud, king of Geshur? Well, it was his grandfather through his mother. And so he's finding a home with his grandfather, and that's where he stays for 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom. Now, what was that? Is it Judge Wapner who says, don't take the law into your own hands, take them to court? Isn't it Judge Wapner? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. You've heard the phrase many times. Well, sometimes if you think going to court is not going to give you satisfaction, you take the law into your own hands. You know, Hollywood's made a lot of money through the years making movies about individuals who take the law into their own hand because they go to court, they don't find any satisfaction, so they just go on a vigilante rage and do what they feel like they have to do. I believe a case could be made. Absalom felt like, I've got no other recourse here. Daddy's not going to do anything about it. Justice is crying out, and so he took the law in his own hands. He didn't have the right to do that, but you can almost understand why he felt the way he did. That didn't make it right. But I was serious about beating people, by the way. I really think, I work in corrections, and I deal with people every day, and I'm thinking it would have been so much better for you and for this county and for this state if we just beaten the tar out of you, and if you do it again, we'll beat you more. We'll give you medical treatment when you were through beating you, but we're going to beat you, humiliate you. I guarantee you that's going to go a lot further than stopping some of this stuff than just locking somebody up for 5 or 10 or 15 years. For many of them are just really kind of petty crimes compared to what they should be dealing with. But anyway, y'all think I'm crazy. That's all right.
Hey, when I was a kid, it worked.
That's what my parents did to me when I did wrong. Of course, I guess now that the thing is time out, right? kid misbehaves, you don't beat him, you put him in the corner. You can ask the kid in the corner, how long you got, sir? I got 5 minutes. Yeah, I got a 30-minute gig on mine. Do I? Did you just call me a loser? What is that? Huh? Take your ex? I don't know. A what? $834 in your songbooks, please. Registration for Camp in Agahey will open this Saturday, the 21st. There's a discounted price for those who register before May 31st. Registration can be completed at www.campinagahey.org. So just kind of a heads up, if you'd like to get a discount on your rate this year, you can go to campinagahey.org. Don't forget the 5th Sunday this month, contribution. We're going to put in above and beyond what we normally put in. We're trying to double what we normally give on this 5th Sunday, so please, if you can, be thinking ahead and making plans for that. We need volunteers to cut grass this season. Please sign the list on the table in the foyer. If you have any questions, you can ask Ronnie Cheek, who's here tonight, and he'll be glad to answer those questions for you. Widowhood Luncheon will be next Wednesday, the 25th, at 11:30 here at the building, and this effort is being expanded to invite other widows and widowers from other congregations. So if you'd like to help in preparing food, or is it widows only? Widows and widows. Please see Deanna Johnson. Don't forget the area-wide singing will be Friday the 27th at 7 p.m. Also, there are some fresh limes, that's fruit, in the fellowship hall that are free to anyone who would like some. They're left over from the Dorcas ministry this week. So if you'd like to go get some limes, take home with you, there's a I think they're sitting on the table in the serving line. Good to see my mother back with us tonight. She didn't miss Sunday, but she was at the emergency room Monday evening. Very high blood pressure. And have you yet found out exactly what caused that? They don't know yet. But certainly want to remember my mother in your prayers. My Uncle Lester, my father's oldest brother, is, as he said, coming in tonight, breathing his last breaths. And not going to be with us much longer. And certainly want to extend sympathy to my family, my father, and his family in particular. Naomi Key is having ear surgery on the 4th of May, and there she is. And we hope that all goes well for her. Good to have Brother Posey with us tonight. You got your hand where you can grasp yet? Hand reconstruction. We certainly hope and pray that. Certainly want to remember the Posies in our prayers. Adam and Angela are not with us tonight. Angela has had some serious back issues, and Arthur is sick. And so I want to remember my children also in your prayers tonight. Are there any other announcements we need to make before we dismiss? We've been studying the unfortunate period in David's life when he was suffering the judgment of God because of his sin with Bathsheba and murder of Uriah the Hittite. And it just kind of struck me as I'm reading it. I'm thinking, about what Solomon and what he himself said. David, of course, wrote the first psalm, and in that first psalm, blessed is a man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law does he meditate day and night. You're like a tree that's planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season. Everything he does shall prosper. The wicked are not so. David had written that song, and he intellectually knew that. But in his life, did not always live that. And unfortunately, because he chose the path of wickedness, he suffered terribly. Even though God forgave him, still there were the consequences of those terrible choices that David had made. And so it is with all of us. We have a choice to make. We can choose to serve God and be at peace with ourselves, with God, and with others, and be happy and live a joy-filled life. Or we can choose to go our own way and do our own thing and be shackled to sin and be enslaved to unrighteousness and be miserable and unhappy. The choice is ours. As we sing this song of invitation that's been announced, I pray if there's anyone here tonight who is wanting to unshackle themselves from the slavery and the burden of sin and to be set free in Christ, that certainly you will make that choice tonight through gospel obedience, or that you'll be restored to your first love. We stand ready to assist you in any way if we can. So please make that need known while together we stand and as we sing.
Would you be free from the burden?